Hey everybody, welcome to our explanation of our anti-gravity water demonstration. So before we begin, first a big question. What exactly is a flame? So when you have a flame, the heat of the flame helps the wax combine with oxygen in a chemical reaction that releases even more heat. So when you have a candle and the flame, that's what it's doing with the oxygen to create more and more heat, and it just keeps going and going. So now back to our big question. Why does the water rise up into the flask when you put it over top of that candle? So when the candle goes out, the water level rises up. So here we have Maya explain a little bit about what's going on.
Hi everyone, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the anti-gravity water. So when the flask goes over the flame, it traps hot air and I'm going to be using these Pick Me Pops as molecules.
Okay, so show us what the Pick Me Pops would look like if they were air and they were hot air. So what are you doing with the Pick Me Pops?
I'm spreading them out.
Okay, so when the air is hot, it's really spread out. Okay, so then after the flame goes out, what happens to the molecules as they start to cool down and the air starts to cool down?
When the molecules cool down, all of them start to come to the bottom and squish.
And they're in a smaller space.
Yeah.
And as they become into a smaller space, what is that called in science?
Vacuum. A vacuum.
Okay, so then what happens when you have a vacuum? What happens with the water?
So the water comes up to fill in that empty space. Bye. Keep watching this video to find out a little bit more by Dr. Gersh. Bye. Okay, so a little bit more detail. So the rising water has little to do with the fact that the fire uses up the oxygen. That is a common misconception with this demonstration. People think that it has a lot to do with what's going on with the oxygen, but it actually has more to do with the molecules. So instead, the hot and the cold molecules are really what determine how this effect works. So it has more to do with how spread out the molecules are inside the flask. So when they're much more spread out, like for hot air, they're going to do something different when they cool down. So when the flask is placed over the lit candle, hot air is trapped inside, like that. Now here you can see some hot air escaping from the flask when it's put over top. So what you'll see is when the flask is coming down, you'll start to see an air bubble that comes out over there on the right side. It's coming out of the flask because the hot air is spreading out and it really wants to escape that flask. Okay, so the flame will go out because all of the oxygen is used up. And when that happens, the molecules of gas inside the flask cool down when the flame goes out. And the molecules take up less space when they are colder. Because the mouth of the flask is underwater, air cannot enter the flask. This leaves a lot of empty space. In science, we call this a vacuum. So the water in the bowl rushes up into the flask to take up the empty space. So it has the ability to defy gravity. So again, just to wrap up, why does the water rise up into the flask? It's because we created a vacuum inside the flask. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that one. See you later.